There are moments in life that don't announce themselves as important. Moments that arrive quietly, disguised as ordinary days, ordinary places, ordinary conversations, and yet carry within them the power to change the way we understand ourselves. This is a story about one of those moments. At that time in my life, nothing dramatic was happening. My days followed familiar paths, my routines were predictable, and most of my thoughts were focused on the details that fill our hours without ever really filling our hearts. I often stopped at the same small shop on my way home, more out of habit than intention. And over time, I began to exchange a few casual words with a young woman who worked there. We spoke about the weather, about how busy the day had been, about small forgettable things, and yet slowly, without any clear reason, I noticed that whenever she was there, my mood softened. My steps slowed, and a quiet sense of comfort seemed to settle in my chest. It wasn't a powerful attention or a sudden certainty, but something gentler and more confusing. The kind of feeling that doesn't demand attention, yet refuses to be ignored. The kind that shows itself in the way you linger longer than necessary, in the way you replay simple conversations on your walk home, in the way an ordinary day feels slightly less heavy. I tried not to name it, because naming it would have meant dealing with it, and dealing with it would have meant risking the fragile balance of peace I had built around my life. Then, one afternoon, I learned that her birthday was coming. And with that simple piece of information, the thought rose in me that I couldn't push back down. I found myself imagining what it would be like to ask her out, to step beyond the small, safe space of casual conversation and admit that her presence meant something to me. Almost immediately, another voice followed, reminding me of all the reasons not to do such a thing, all the ways it could be awkward or disappointing or embarrassing. All the ways it could end with me feeling foolish for ever having hoped at all. For days I lived between those two inner currents, one quietly leaning forward, the other firmly pulling back. The night I finally decided to call her, I sat alone with my phone resting in my hand, staring at the screen as though it were something dangerous and alive. I unlocked it and locked it again, typed her name only to erase it, lifted the phone only to set it back down. While inside me, excitement and fear moved back and forth like opposing tides. When I finally dialed, my finger trembled so much that I almost missed the button. And after the first ring, I panicked and ended the call, feeling strangely disappointed in myself. When I called again, my voice didn't sound like my own. She answered kindly, thanked me for asking, and told me she already had plans. There was no unkindness in her response, no dramatic pause, no moment worth retelling. And yet, when the call ended, I felt the familiar heaviness of rejection settled quietly into my chest, accompanied by a subtle embarrassment that had nowhere to go because no one had seen what I had just done. I remember sitting there afterward, holding the phone long after the screen had gone dark, wishing I could rewind the last few minutes and return to the easier version of myself who had felt nothing at all. The next day, without quite understanding why, I found myself standing in front of a rack of birthday cards, reading words that felt either too cheerful or too empty, until I chose one that was simple and gentle and reminded me of how I actually felt. When I got home, I wrote a short message inside. Not something clever or impressive, but something true, something that admitted appreciation without demanding anything in return. As soon as I slid the card into my jacket, doubt rose again, sharper this time, questioning what I thought I was doing, warning me that I was only creating another opportunity to feel exposed. When I later walked toward the place where she worked, I could feel the card against my chest, and with every step, the impulse to return around grew stronger. I imagined her confusion, her indifference, her discomfort, and at that point, I even pushed the card under my shirt, as though hiding it could also hide the part of me that wanted to be seen. By the time I reached the door, I had almost convinced myself that I would simply say hello, exchange a few familiar words, and leave with my feelings still safely folded inside me. We talked for a few minutes about nothing important at all. About how the day had been. About small details that filled the space between us. And because I couldn't read her expression or the meaning behind her tone, I decided it was safer to leave things exactly as they were. I said goodbye and started walking toward the door, already preparing myself to carry the unspoken weight of the card back home with me. And then I stopped. Not because I suddenly felt brave, but because I felt tired of holding something that wanted to be released. I realized that if I walked out in that moment, I would not be protecting myself from discomfort. I would only be extending it, carrying it with me into the evening, into the next day, into every small replay of the scene I would inevitably have in my mind. I turned back, aware of the warmth in my hands and the quietness of my breath. Took the card from my shirt, walked up to her, and placed it gently on the counter, telling her simply that it was for her birthday. She smiled, thanked me, and set it aside without opening it. That was all. No visible emotion, no meaningful pause, no sign that this small offering had touched her in any particular way. I nodded, wished her a good day, and stepped back outside, where the air felt cooler and my disappointment for a brief moment felt heavier than the courage that had brought me there. But as I walked, something unexpected began to happen. The tightness that had lived in my chest for days was no longer there. I wasn't suddenly joyful, and I certainly wasn't triumphant, but I felt lighter, as though something had loosened inside me, as though I had finally set down a quiet burden I hadn't realized I was carrying. I noticed that my thoughts were no longer circling around her reaction, but around my own, around the simple fact that I had done what felt honest to me, and that in doing so I could breathe more freely than I had in a long while. Nothing followed from that moment. We didn't begin anything. Life returned to its familiar rhythm, and yet I was not quite the same. I had seen how much effort I had been investing in avoiding a feeling, and how little it had actually taken to face it. And I understood then that much of the heaviness we carry does not come from what happens to us, but from what we refuse to allow to move through us. From the words we swallow, from the feelings we manage, from the part of ourselves we keep carefully hidden so we won't have to deal with the uncertainty of being real. That day did not give me a relationship, but it gave me something quieter and in its own way more enduring. It gave me the experience of choosing honesty over comfort, expression over control, and in that choice I felt a subtle respect for myself return. I realized that opening the heart is not something we do to get a certain response, but something we do to remain in relationship with who we are, to avoid becoming strangers to our own inner lives. Most of our lives are shaped in moments exactly like this. Moments that will never be photographed, never applauded, never validated from the outside. Moments that look like nothing more than a conversation, a walk, a small decision made in silence. And yet, it is in these unremarkable senses that we slowly decide whether we will move through the world guarded and distant, or present and participating, willing to feel whatever comes as the price of being alive. The end.